The Times suggests that Labour's proposal of a 20% VAT on school fees, on private school fees, will originally anticipated to take effect in September 2025, is now likely to be implemented as early as January 2025. And this acceleration, driven by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, aims to fulfil a manifesto commitment and generate an additional 1.6 billion annually. The revenue is intended to fund 6,500 new specialist state schools teachers. Whether it's going to raise that money, first of all, is one point, but the idea that it's going to fund 6,500 new specialist state school teachers is absurd. It's simply funding the adverts to recruit them, and those teachers will not be in existence in January 2025. It takes some time to recruit, to train teachers, and if they are available, then they're already in the system. They're not, because teaching is no longer an attractive occupation. It's an occupation overwhelmed by paperwork and overwhelmed by a feeling that teachers are no longer respected as they once were. Change that round, and I think people will go flooding into the business, into the industry. The policy implementation, the speeding up of the policy, is possibly a result. It's in Labour's first finance bill, as announced in the King's Speech, but it's also possibly something to do with the threat of legal action, and to get in there before that action takes effect. The removal of tax exemption is projected to raise substantial funds for public education, but I don't think you improve one thing by destroying another. And this will be destructive, not of the larger public schools or the larger private schools, but of the smaller private schools that particularly target those children who need special help. And they are going to struggle. The removal of tax exemption is projected to raise funds, but I think it will also, I think it will be more destructive than helpful. What we need is a rethink of our educational process across the board. And some parents could see their fees increase in a single year, 8% rise in September 2024, followed by another hike to cover the new VAT in January 2025. Some schools, such as those in the Cognita group, have preemptively offered parents the option to pay a year's fees up front to mitigate the impact. Many schools may need to cut costs by reducing staff, lowering bursary offerings, and increasing class sizes to manage the new tax. The tax doesn't necessarily need to be passed on to the parents, but despite reassurances from Reeves that schools don't need to pass on that full VAT cost, many head teachers foresee at least a 15% rise in fees. And although private schools are preparing legal challenges against the VAT imposition, arguing that it could disproportionately affect smaller institutions and family-run schools, it might target large, wealthy institutions as well. It shouldn't indiscriminately apply to all private schools. That's the argument that will be put forward. And the additional argument that education isn't subject to VAT. The argument made by the Labour Party is that private schools are primarily businesses. That's not necessarily true. It might be true of the bigger private schools. It's not always true of the smaller private schools that often struggle simply to be a resource. Reeves argues that the policy addresses educational inequality. I would argue that possibly it exploits inequality. And with funds redirected to improve state school infrastructure and teacher quality, you can't improve teacher quality if they don't exist. So the broader educational priorities focusing on providing all children with a robust start in life, addressing skill gaps in the workforce, commendable. But actually, we need to rethink the way we do education in Britain. The legal challenges, it falls into three groups, really. The disproportionate impact, that the tax disproportionately targets smaller schools, potentially leading to closures and increased pressures, therefore, on the state school system, which will then have to accommodate a batch of new students. The economic viability, some schools argue that VAT imposition threatens their financial viability, given their smaller size and limited financial resources compared to larger institutions. Well, I would suggest strongly that the larger institutions support the smaller private schools. And the fairness and equality issue, that's the third point. Legal arguments might include claims that the policy unfairly targets all private schools, regardless of their financial standing or profit status. And that, again, possibly is unfair. But I think the biggest legal challenge is that there shouldn't be VAT. We shouldn't be taxing education, however that education is presented. Labour's push to accelerate the implementation of VAT on private schools to January 25 reflects its commitment to funding state education improvements swiftly. However, this has sparked concerns and preparations for legal battles from private schools, and this could be in itself quite an expensive undertaking. The legal discourse is expected to focus on the policy's fairness and its disproportionate impact on smaller educational institutions, and it will waste time. Even if this thing goes ahead, will it see an improvement in state education? I doubt it. State education, I've taught in state schools, I've taught in private schools, I've taught in the UK, I've taught abroad, and my impression, and I've also taught teachers how to teach, and my impression is that the education system in Britain is struggling to accommodate the sheer pressure on teachers to tick all the boxes, to do all the paperwork, to deal with the changing syllabuses, and to maintain classroom discipline as classroom sizes increase. These pressures are a put-off to new teachers, and retaining teachers is a bigger problem than recruiting new teachers, and a great deal needs to be done. I think Rachel Reeves' indication that teachers' pay is going to go up will be a significant boost, but may not be enough. Teachers' pay has been suppressed for too long for a small increase to be efficacious.